Hey everybody, in this video I'm going to explain how to name and write formulas for covalently bonded compounds. The first step is to identify, or to be able to identify, what type of compound you have, and we'll compare covalent to the other most common type of chemical bonding, ionic. Ionic substances are composed of metals bonded to nonmetals, so to identify these you'd need a periodic table, and you would need to remember the dividing line between metals and nonmetals shown here in red. Everything to the left in blue would count as a metal. Everything to the right, shown in yellow, would be a nonmetal. So if you saw sodium chloride, NaCl, you would know that sodium is on the left of that line. It's a metal. Chlorine on the right is a nonmetal. And you could then say that sodium chloride is held together with ionic bonding and use the appropriate naming style based on that. Same thing here with iron being a metal, oxygen being a nonmetal, and here lithium being a metal, sulfur and oxygen. So here there's two different elements, but they are both nonmetals. This would still count as having an ionic bond. What we're talking about in this video are covalent substances, and you can identify these by knowing that they're composed of only non-metallic elements, like CO2, carbon, and oxygen, both nonmetals. That's covalent bonding. Hydrogen, phosphorus, and oxygen, all also nonmetals. You got to be a little bit careful of hydrogen because it's listed over here with the metals, but it is actually not. It is a non-metal, and it's just put in that column for other reasons. So those are some of the key ideas for this video. Make sure to pause and take some time to write those down. Now that you know how to identify covalent compounds, let's talk about how to name them. In general, when you're naming a covalently bonded substance, you're going to use what we call prefixes to indicate in the name how many atoms there are in each of these substances or in each molecule. The common prefixes used are shown here, 1 through 10 atoms. There might be prefixes for, if there are more than 10 atoms, but you're not likely to see that, so we'll stick with these 10. So if you saw MgCl2, because magnesium is a metal and chlorine is a nonmetal, it is ionic. So you will not see prefixes in that name. This would just be magnesium chloride. But if you saw CO2, carbon, and oxygen, both nonmetals, that makes it covalent, and you will see prefixes in the name. Carbon dioxide, there's the prefix di to indicate 2 oxygen atoms. Those are some of the other key ideas for this video. Make sure to pause and take some time to write those down too. So let's get to the actual naming rules. I've got our prefixes at the top of the video screen, and we're going to work through the naming process for CO2. There's 2 rules to follow. The first rule when naming a covalent compound is to name the element that is written first. So literally left to right, like you read a sentence, the element written first here is C. If we're putting together the name of this compound, I will simply write the name of the element. In C's case, that is carbon. You will add a prefix for that element, but only if there is more than one atom of that element. And in CO2, we don't write the subscript 1, the 1 is implied. Since there is only one carbon, we do not put the prefix. Rule number 2 is to name the second element, change the ending to IDE, and always add a prefix. So my second element is oxygen. We're going to change the ending to oxide. And the second element, no matter how many there are, always gets a prefix. So because there's 2 oxygens, I'll use the prefix to indicate that there are 2 oxygens, and it goes in front of that element's name, carbon dioxide. And that's all there is to it. So naming covalent compounds is pretty straightforward, but make sure to take some time to write those rules down. We're going to wrap it up with 3 more examples to really put these rules all side by side. Here we have NO2. I'm going to name the first element nitrogen. And since there's only one nitrogen, it does not get a prefix. The second element will change to oxide, and the second element always gets a prefix, dioxide. So the official name here would be nitrogen dioxide. Next up, I have a different nitrogen and oxygen compound. As we name the first atom for rule 1, it's again nitrogen, but now there are 2 of them. And if there's more than one of that first atom, then you do indeed put a prefix. This would be dinitrogen. Next up, I have oxygen again, so we'll call it oxide like we always do for the second element, but Remember that second element always gets a prefix, even if there's just one. The prefix for when there's one atom is mono, and we drop the O since there's already an O at the beginning of oxygen and call it dinitrogen monoxide. Here's one last example. The first element again is nitrogen. There's two of them this time, so we do have to put a prefix, dinitrogen. The second atom is oxide again, and it always gets a prefix. The prefix for 4 is tetra. You'll see different versions, whether to leave the A in or drop it off. You kind of do whatever sounds right. I'm not sure exactly of the official correct way to do it, but dinitrogen tetraoxide certainly gets the point across. And that's how you'll name covalent compounds. That also wraps it up for this video. Thanks a lot for watching, and here is a brief summary.